Lena had always loved quiet mornings, the kind that felt almost untouched by noise or hurry. She often said that sunrise had its own kind of magic, something soft and peaceful, that made everything seem possible. That was one of the reasons she enjoyed volunteering at the ranch. While most people were still sleeping, she was already walking down the gravel path toward the stables, breathing in the cool air and listening to the birds waking up around her. It was her favorite part of the day. The ranch itself sat at the edge of town, surrounded by wide-open fields and gentle hills. Horses grazed in the distance, their shapes moving slowly in the pale morning light. The stable roof shone with a thin layer of dew, and the wooden fences cast long shadows across the ground. Lena always felt a sense of calm settling over her when she arrived. It was the kind of place where worries seemed smaller and life felt a little simpler. She had been volunteering there for about a year. At first, she signed up because she loved animals and wanted something meaningful to do on weekends. But over time, the ranch had become more than a hobby. It had turned into a place where she felt a deep connection, one she didn't entirely understand but appreciated all the same. The horses trusted her, and she trusted them. Or at least, she liked to think so. Lena walked into the stable with her usual cheerful energy. She greeted each horse as she passed, calling them by name like old friends. There was Clover, who always nudged the stall door, as if asking for extra attention. There was Maple, the gentle mare with soft brown eyes that seemed to understand every emotion. And then, there was Rusty. Rusty was different from the others. He was tall, strong, and impressive, with a chestnut coat that shone like copper in the sunlight. He had a charm that made people admire him from a distance. But he wasn't the easiest horse to work with. Some days he was calm enough, though still watchful. Other days he seemed distant, as though his thoughts were far away. Lena liked him. She believed even the toughest animals deserved patience, kindness, and time. This morning, as Lena approached his stall, she felt her usual mix of respect and curiosity. Rusty stood quietly inside, his head lowered slightly, his mane falling messily over his neck. He didn't react right away when she came near, but that wasn't unusual. Rusty had his own rhythm, his own way of warming up to the day. "Morning, Rusty," Lena said in a soft voice. She always made sure to speak gently. Horses paid attention to tone, something she had learned early in her volunteer training. She placed a hand on the stall door and watched him for a moment. His ears flicked at the sound of her voice, but he didn't turn fully toward her. That was all right. Some horses were like that, quiet in their greetings. She continued with her tasks, starting with refilling the buckets of the nearby stalls. She moved around with practiced ease, humming lightly under her breath. The stable smelled of fresh hay, warm wood, and the faint sweetness of grain. The floor was still cool from the night, and the soft shuffling sounds from the horses added a cozy rhythm to the morning. Lena worked carefully and calmly. She always believed that animals could sense emotions. If she rushed or felt distracted, the horses might pick up on her mood. So she tried to stay present and aware. She brushed Clover, straightened Maple's blanket, and paused every so often to enjoy the quiet around her. She loved how the early sunlight slipped through the gaps in the stable walls, painting soft golden lines across the floor. As she returned to Rusty's stall, she felt the same peaceful determination she always did. She wanted Rusty to trust her fully one day, not because she expected anything grand from it, but because earning an animal's trust felt like a special achievement, a sign that she was doing something right. Rusty lifted his head slightly this time. His dark eyes followed her movements as she approached, calm but observant. Lena smiled, pleased by the attention. She leaned her elbows gently on the stall door, keeping a comfortable distance as she spoke to him. "You doing okay today?" she asked. It wasn't as though Rusty could answer her in words, but she felt that talking made a difference. Animals understood more than people often assumed. Rusty blinked slowly. His tail swished once, brushing lightly against his hind leg. His ears turned toward her, relaxed and steady. That was usually a good sign. Lena felt a small wave of pride. She always found moments like this rewarding, tiny exchanges of trust, quiet and simple, but meaningful. She noticed that his water bucket was lower than usual. She made a mental note to refill it. Before stepping inside the stall, she paused, as she always did, to watch his posture. Horses couldn't speak, but their bodies did. The way they stood, the way their ears moved, the way they shifted their weight, all of it meant something. Lena looked over Rusty carefully. He seemed calm enough. No signs of restlessness. No pacing. No shaking of the head. No uneasy hoof movements. Everything looked normal. She felt comfortable enough to continue her routine. She reached for the bucket handle and prepared to bring it out for a refill. She moved slowly, so Rusty could see what she was doing. Sudden movements weren't helpful with horses. Even calm ones could get startled. The stable door creaked slightly behind her, and Lena glanced back. It was only the wind pushing on the wood, something that happened often in the morning. She laughed softly at herself. She didn't get scared easily, but the ranch had a way of surprising her sometimes. She turned back toward Rusty and continued her tasks. She felt peaceful, almost meditative. The quiet of the stable, the soft breathing of the horses, and the fresh morning air, all blended together into something soothing. As she worked, she thought about how much she had grown since she started volunteering. She had learned how to approach animals with respect, how to read their signals, how to take responsibility for their well-being. She had learned patience too, the kind of patience that required presence, kindness, and a willingness to listen without expecting anything in return. Each day taught her something new, and she welcomed it. She felt grateful for the ranch. It wasn't just a place where she came to help. It had become a place where she understood herself better. She learned how to be calm even when life felt busy. She learned how small moments could matter. She learned how deeply an animal could affect a person's heart. As she continued her morning routine, Lena felt hopeful. She didn't expect anything unusual to happen today. To her, it was just another peaceful morning. A chance to care for the animals she loved, enjoy the quiet, and spend time with the creatures who trusted her presence. And she had no reason to expect anything else. Lena moved through the stable with the same calm rhythm she always carried, but as she returned to Rusty's stall, she sensed a small shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't dramatic or obvious, just something subtle, like a quiet change in the air that she couldn't quite name. She paused for a moment, wondering if she was simply imagining things. Everything looked normal. The stable was still peaceful, and Rusty stood in his stall, exactly where she had left him. She walked toward him with an easy smile, holding the bucket in her hand. The handle clinked softly, and Rusty lifted his head, watching her. His ears moved forward, then sideways, as if he was trying to decide what kind of mood he was in. Lena didn't think much of it. Horses often communicated through their ears, and she knew that slight changes in their posture didn't always mean something serious. "Hey again," she said gently, her voice warm and friendly. She always tried to greet each horse the same way: soft tone, slow movements, and lots of patience. It made her feel connected to them, and she believed it made them feel safe too. Rusty stepped slightly to the side, not in a hurried way, just enough to show he was alert. His tail flicked as if brushing away an invisible fly. He wasn't restless, but he wasn't fully relaxed either. Lena thought he might still be waking up. Some horses needed a few minutes to settle into the day. She set the bucket down outside the stall door and leaned against the wooden frame. The morning sunlight filtered through the gaps in the stable walls, making warm patterns on the ground. Dust particles floated gently in the sunbeams like tiny glowing specks. If someone walked in at that moment, they might have thought the entire stable was glowing. Lena took a deep breath. She loved moments like this: simple, quiet beauty in everyday tasks. She reached out slowly, her hand open and relaxed, making sure Rusty could see it. Horses appreciated being approached in a calm way, and Lena respected that. She wasn't in a hurry. She never rushed her interactions with them. Rusty lowered his head a little, looking at her hand. His eyes were gentle but thoughtful, as if he was trying to remember something or understand her intention. Lena smiled again, her confidence growing naturally. She felt comfortable around him, even though she knew he was more unpredictable than the others. She stepped halfway into the stall, careful with her pace. The straw on the ground made a soft rustling sound under her boots. Rusty shifted his weight slightly. Nothing alarming, just a small adjustment like someone gently stretching. "Let me just check your water," she said softly. She reached toward the bucket hook inside the stall. Rusty watched her closely, turning his head just a little. Lena noticed his movement, but thought it was simple curiosity. Horses often liked to know what was happening around them. She touched the rim of the bucket and lifted it slowly. It was lighter than she expected, which meant Rusty had probably been drinking more than usual. She wondered if he had felt warmer the previous night, or if something had made him thirstier than normal. As she lifted the bucket, the light caught its metal surface, sending a quick reflection across the stall wall. Rusty blinked and took a small step forward. His movement startled Lena just a bit. Not in a frightening way, just enough for her to pause and look up. "You're okay," she said softly, giving him a reassuring smile. Rusty shifted again, this time slightly closer to her. His shoulder brushed gently against her sleeve. Lena didn't expect the contact, but didn't think it was unusual either. Horses sometimes nudged or stepped near people to show interest or communicate something simple, like wanting attention. Lena held the bucket with one hand and rested her other hand on the stall door. She planned to refill the bucket and return quickly. The moment felt ordinary, routine, the same as any other day. She didn't sense anything troubling or uncomfortable. She felt calm, like she always did during morning chores. She turned slightly, adjusting her grip on the bucket. The soft scrape of metal against wood made a tiny sound, barely noticeable. Yet Rusty reacted with a sudden, alert motion, lifting his head higher. Lena noticed it but didn't understand what had caused the quick change in his posture. Maybe he had heard something she didn't. Horses often picked up distant sounds before humans did. "Easy," she whispered automatically, even though her tone wasn't meant to correct anything. It was just a natural habit, something she said often when the horses shifted unexpectedly. Rusty moved his head closer to her. Not in a harsh way, but with a suddenness that surprised her. Lena felt the brush of his warm breath on her sleeve. She turned her head slightly, unsure what he wanted. Sometimes horses simply wanted attention or reassurance. She assumed it was one of those simple, harmless moments. But Rusty continued leaning toward her, a little too closely this time. It wasn't rough, but it wasn't his usual gentle behavior either. Before she could shift her arm or adjust her position, she felt his teeth close lightly around her forearm. It wasn't a harsh bite, it felt more like a sudden grip. Firm, but not aggressive. Lena gasped softly, not out of fear, but pure surprise. She hadn't expected any contact like that. The feeling was strange, not painful, just unusual enough to make her freeze for a second. "Rusty," she said in a gentle but startled tone. Rusty released her almost immediately, stepping back in a confused motion. It seemed he hadn't meant anything harmful by it. Horses sometimes mouthed objects or nudged with their teeth when they were curious, anxious, or unsure about something. Lena had seen it happen with other animals, though she hadn't experienced it directly with Rusty before. She stepped back too, more out of surprise than discomfort. Her heart beat a little faster. Not from fear, but from the unexpectedness of the moment. She looked down at her arm. It didn't hurt. There was no mark, nothing alarming, just a sensation left over from the pressure. "It's okay," she whispered, partly to herself and partly to him. Rusty blinked at her, ears tilting back slightly, then forward again, as if he was trying to understand what had just happened. His posture shifted into something more apologetic and unsure. Lena could tell he hadn't acted out of anger or frustration. It had felt more like a sudden misunderstanding. A small mistake. Something neither of them had anticipated. Lena took a slow breath. She didn't want Rusty to feel tense or confused. Animals sensed emotions quickly, and she didn't want him thinking she was upset with him. "It's all right," she said softly, stepping toward the stall door to collect herself. Rusty lowered his head again, calmer now. His eyes softened, and his breath released in a quiet sigh. He seemed settled, as if the moment had already passed for him. Lena stood outside the stall for a few seconds, holding the empty bucket and letting her thoughts settle. The stable was still peaceful. The sunlight still streamed through the wooden beams. Other horses rustled in their stalls, completely unaware of the moment that had just occurred. It had been unexpected, surprising, a little unnerving, but not frightening. She touched her arm lightly. It felt normal. Everything was fine. Still, she wondered what had caused Rusty to react that way. Maybe he had been startled by the bucket sound. Maybe he had felt anxious for a reason she hadn't noticed. Maybe she had misread a small sign in his body language. She glanced back at him. He stood quietly now, head lowered, breathing calmly. He didn't seem upset. If anything, he looked more relaxed than before, as if the moment had been as confusing for him as it was for her. Lena let out a slow breath and reached for the water faucet to refill the bucket. The day wasn't ruined. The moment wasn't dangerous. It was simply something unexpected, one of those instances that reminded her how important it was to understand animals deeply. As she filled the bucket, her mind replayed the moment again and again. It wasn't painful, but it was something she knew she should learn from, and she promised herself quietly that she would. Lena walked toward the small bench outside the stable, the freshly filled bucket still in her hand. She placed it gently on the ground and sat down, letting out a long, steady breath. The morning was still calm, but her mind felt a little unsettled after the sudden moment with Rusty. It wasn't that anything bad had happened. It was simply unexpected, and her thoughts seemed to circle around the experience like a soft breeze that refused to rest. She looked down at her arm again. It felt normal. No pain, no discomfort, just a faint memory of pressure where Rusty had gripped her lightly. If someone else had been watching, they might not have even noticed anything unusual at all. But Lena had felt it, and that was enough to make her think more deeply about it. She brushed a piece of hay off her jeans and smiled a little to herself. She wasn't afraid, far from it. She cared too much about the horses to let a small moment change that. Still, she couldn't help wondering why Rusty had acted the way he did. It felt like a small puzzle she needed to solve, not because she was worried about herself, but because she cared about Rusty's feelings and comfort. A few seconds later, she heard footsteps approaching. It was Mr. Harris, one of the senior workers at the ranch. He was an older man with kind eyes and a warm smile, someone who had spent most of his life around horses. He knew them in a way that always amazed Lena, almost as if he could understand their moods without them making a single sound. "You're out early as always," he said with a friendly grin as he walked toward her. Lena smiled back, though her expression still carried a touch of thoughtfulness. "Yeah, I just finished the water buckets." Mr. Harris studied her face for a moment. "You all right? You look a little quieter than usual." Lena hesitated, unsure whether she should share the small incident. It felt so minor, almost too small to mention. But she also trusted Mr. Harris, and she knew that his experience with horses could help her understand what had happened. "Rusty acted a little different today," she said softly. Mr. Harris pulled up a stool and sat beside her. "Different how?" "He moved toward me pretty quickly," she explained, choosing her words carefully. "Not in a troubling way, just suddenly. And then he sort of held my arm for a moment. Not harshly, just surprising." Mr. Harris nodded thoughtfully. "Did he seem uneasy before that?" "No," she said. "He looked calm at first. Maybe a little alert later, but nothing that made me feel worried." He murmured. "Sometimes horses act out of curiosity, you know. Their mouths are one of the ways they explore things. And if something around them feels new, unusual, or a bit confusing, they can react before thinking." Lena nodded slowly. That explanation made sense. She had seen younger horses do that, nibbling at sleeves or tugging at shoelaces playfully. Rusty wasn't normally that playful, but maybe something had startled him in a small, harmless way. "Do you think I did something wrong?" she asked quietly. Mr. Harris shook his head firmly. "No, not from what you've told me. Horses communicate in many ways, and not every action is a sign of something serious. Sometimes, it's just a moment. What matters is how you handle it, and you seem calm as ever. His reassurance warmed her heart. She took a deep breath and felt some of her worry melt away. Lena didn't like overthinking things, but she also didn't want to ignore small moments that could teach her something. Mr. Harris looked toward Rusty's stall. "He's a good horse," he said gently, "but he's got a thoughtful mind. He notices everything, even little things most people don't see." Lena glanced at Rusty too. He was standing quietly again, his head low as he brushed his nose against some stray hay. He looked peaceful, completely different from how he had acted earlier. It made Lena wonder even more what had caused that sudden shift. Maybe he had been surprised by the reflection of the bucket. Maybe the wind had made a noise. Maybe he had sensed something subtle that she hadn't noticed. "I'll check on him again after I finish the chores," she said, feeling more settled. "That's a good idea," Mr. Harris agreed. He stood up and gave her shoulder a gentle pat. "Just remember, even gentle animals have moments of confusion. Not everything has a big meaning behind it." When he walked away, Lena stayed seated for a moment longer, letting the quiet morning steady her thoughts. The sunlight warmed her skin, and the gentle rustling of the leaves outside the stable helped her relax. She watched Rusty from where she sat and noticed that he had begun to nibble on some hay again, perfectly calm. She stood up with a renewed sense of ease. She picked up the bucket and carried it back to the stall. Placing it securely on its hook, she didn't go inside this time. She simply watched Rusty from a comfortable distance. "Hey, boy," she said softly. Rusty turned his head toward her slowly. His eyes looked calm, almost apologetic in their gentle expression. She didn't know if he understood what had happened earlier, but animals could sense emotions in their own ways. "It's all right," she said in a soothing tone. Rusty's ears flicked forward, and he took a quiet breath. The moment felt peaceful again, and Lena felt comforted by the simple exchange. As she stepped back from the stall, she saw Mia, another volunteer, entering the stable. Mia was cheerful and energetic, always moving fast, always humming a bright tune under her breath. She waved at Lena as she came closer. "Morning," Mia said brightly. "You look thoughtful today." Lena laughed lightly. Apparently, she wasn't hiding her emotions well. Just had a small moment with Rusty. "Nothing big." Mia raised her eyebrows with curiosity. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Lena said quickly. "He just moved toward me suddenly. I think he was confused or reacting to something small." Mia nodded. "Horses have their moods just like we do. Rusty's sweet, though. He probably didn't mean anything by it." Lena appreciated her understanding. It helped hearing it from more than one person. She didn't want to exaggerate the moment in her mind. It was easy to do that when something unexpected happened. But now, after talking with both Mr. Harris and Mia, the moment felt smaller, easier to understand, almost ordinary. She went on with her chores, sweeping the stable walkway, brushing Clover, and checking Maple's hooves. Each task helped her settle further into her usual calm rhythm. By the time she finished the morning routine, she felt completely steady again. When she walked past Rusty's stall once more, she stopped and watched him quietly. He raised his head, his soft eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. He wasn't tense. He wasn't restless. He simply stood there, breathing peacefully, as if the earlier moment had never happened. Lena smiled warmly. She didn't hold anything against him. She cared for him just as much as she cared for the others, maybe even more, because she understood that he needed patience and understanding, just like she did sometimes. She reached out and placed her hand gently on the stall door, not inside, just resting it where Rusty could see it. He stepped forward slowly, lowering his head slightly in a peaceful gesture. Lena felt a quiet happiness growing inside her. This was her favorite kind of moment. Soft, simple, full of trust. Nothing dramatic, nothing intense, just a quiet connection between a girl and the horse she cared for deeply. She knew the day would continue as usual, with no big worries. She knew she would learn from the experience, not fear it. And she knew that the bond between her and Rusty was still intact, maybe even strengthened by the small moment they had shared. The stable felt warm again, filled with the comforting sounds of horses breathing, hooves shifting gently, and the soft hum of morning settling into its routine. Everything felt okay, and Lena felt ready for whatever the rest of the day would bring. The next morning, Lena woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight had barely started touching her bedroom curtains, but she was already wide awake, lying in bed with her thoughts drifting gently back to the ranch. She stretched her arms and stared at the ceiling with a calm expression. Even though the previous day had a surprising moment, she still looked forward to returning. The stable had a peaceful pull that she couldn't resist, a feeling of belonging that made her mornings feel meaningful. She sat up slowly and rubbed her arm unconsciously, not because it hurt, but because the memory was still fresh in her mind. She smiled faintly, shaking her head at how unexpected the moment had been. She wasn't upset with Rusty. In fact, she felt more curious than anything. She wanted to understand him better. That small moment had opened a new space for learning, and Lena always welcomed learning. After getting ready, she grabbed her bag and stepped outside. The morning air was cool and crisp. The sky was painted with soft shades of pink and orange, like the world was gently waking up from sleep. Birds chirped in the distance, and the breeze carried the fresh scent of dew-covered grass. As she walked along the familiar path toward the ranch, Lena took in every detail around her, the tall trees swaying lightly, the small pebbles crunching under her shoes, and the silence of the early hour that felt calm and comforting. She enjoyed this peaceful walk just as much as she enjoyed the horses. When she reached the ranch, she paused for a moment before entering. The stable doors were slightly open, letting a warm beam of morning sunlight spill across the entrance. She loved how the light made everything look softer, almost magical. She stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and wood. It felt like stepping into a place that understood her. Mia was already inside brushing clover. She looked up and smiled when she saw Lena. "Morning," Mia said cheerfully. Lena waved, returning her smile. "Morning. You started early today." "Couldn't sleep," Mia said with a small laugh. "So I thought I'd come in and catch up on the brushing." Lena walked over and stroked Clover's neck gently. The horse responded with a soft nudge, making her smile. After a few moments of chatting, Lena moved toward Rusty's stall. She approached slowly, not because she was nervous, but because she wanted to observe him first, just as she had taught herself. Rusty was standing near the back of his stall, his head lowered as he enjoyed some fresh hay. His tail swayed gently, showing he was calm. "Hey, Rusty," she said softly. Rusty lifted his head and looked at her with quiet eyes. His ears moved forward, relaxed and curious. He didn't step toward her immediately, but he didn't seem distant either. He seemed simply thoughtful. That was nothing new. Rusty had always been a thoughtful horse. Lena leaned lightly against the stall door, watching him for a moment. She wasn't in a hurry. She had learned that giving an animal a little time to acknowledge her presence made the interaction smoother. She observed his posture, the gentle way he breathed, and the way his eyes softened when they landed on her. "It's good to see you calm today," she whispered with a tiny smile. Rusty blinked slowly, which was usually a sign of comfort. Lena felt a small wave of relief. She didn't want him to feel unsettled or confused about yesterday. Even though he didn't express emotions the way humans did, she believed animals remembered more than people realized. She began her morning routine, starting with checking each stall, brushing the horses, and making sure everything was in its proper place. As she worked, she kept glancing at Rusty, trying to read him through small details. His ear movements, his breathing, the way he shifted his weight. Everything about him appeared peaceful today. When it came time to clean his stall, Lena paused outside his door. She didn't step inside right away. Instead, she rested her hands on the wooden frame and waited for Rusty to look at her. After a few moments, he turned his head toward her and watched her with calm curiosity. "Mind if I come in?" she asked softly, even though she knew he couldn't answer in words. Still, the way Rusty shifted slightly to the side felt like permission. She stepped in slowly, keeping her movements soft and steady. Rusty stood quietly, His head tilted slightly as he followed her with gentle eyes. Lena felt comfortable. She didn't think about yesterday's moment anymore. Instead, she focused on the present, Rusty's calm breathing, the warmth of the stable, the sound of hay rustling under her boots. She began to arrange the straw in his stall, working in slow, even motions. Rusty stood near her but kept a respectful distance this time. It was as if he could sense her carefulness and appreciated it. Lena watched him from the corner of her eye and smiled. "You seem much better today," she said in a gentle voice. Rusty lowered his head and brushed the ground softly with his nose. The movement felt peaceful, almost comforting. As she worked, she remembered her conversation with Mr. Harris from the day before. He had reminded her that horses, like people, had their moods and moments. Not everything meant something big or concerning. Sometimes it was just a part of their personality, a part of their nature. She let those words settle in her mind as she observed Rusty. She felt grateful for the guidance. It had helped her move past her initial confusion and shift into a mindset of understanding rather than worry. After finishing the stall cleaning, Lena rewarded Rusty with fresh hay and a gentle scratch on his neck. Rusty leaned into her touch, surprising her with how affectionate the gesture felt. It wasn't dramatic, it was soft and subtle, just like him. Lena felt her heart warm. She loved moments like these, quiet gestures of trust from the animals she cared for. It was these small connections that made all the hard work worth it. Later in the day, the ranch grew busier. Families came to visit, young riders prepared for their lessons, and volunteers moved around carrying saddles, grooming brushes, and buckets. The air buzzed with cheerful energy, but Lena stayed focused on her tasks. A little girl approached Rusty's stall with wide eyes. "He's so pretty," she exclaimed. Lena smiled. "He is. He's gentle too. Just a little shy sometimes." The girl pressed her hands against the stall door and watched Rusty with admiration. Rusty looked at her curiously, flicking his ears in her direction. He didn't step back or shy away. Instead, he took a small step closer. Lowering his head slightly, the little girl giggled with pure delight. "He likes me!" Lena's heart felt full watching the scene. She loved seeing Rusty interact gently with people. It showed that yesterday's surprise wasn't a reflection of who he truly was. He was still the same thoughtful horse she had always known. As the day moved forward, Lena carried out the rest of her duties. Each small moment, from brushing the horses to guiding visitors, helped her feel more connected to the ranch. She realized how much she had learned since volunteering there. She had grown more patient, more aware, and more confident around the animals. When the sun began to set, and the ranch grew quieter again, Lena returned to Rusty's stall one last time. Rusty stood peacefully, his head lowered in contentment. "I learned something yesterday," she said softly. "Not everything surprising is something to fear. And sometimes, understanding grows from small, quiet moments." Rusty blinked slowly, and Lena gently stroked his neck. As she left the ranch that evening, she felt calmer, wiser, and more connected to Rusty than ever before. The day had been peaceful, the lesson had been valuable, and her bond with Rusty had grown in a quiet, meaningful way. When Lena returned to the ranch the following week, the morning felt especially calm. The sky was covered in a gentle layer of pale clouds, and the soft light made everything look peaceful. She walked along the familiar gravel path with a comfortable sense of confidence. Her steps were steady, her mind clear, and her heart open to whatever the day would bring. She felt ready, not just for the chores, but for any new lesson she might learn. As she approached the stable, she paused for a moment, letting the soft breeze brush against her face. She looked at the wide pastures stretching across the land, and felt a quiet joy settling inside her. She realized how much this place meant to her, not only because she loved the animals, but because the ranch had helped her understand herself in ways she hadn't expected. She pushed open the stable door and stepped inside. The warm smell of hay and wood greeted her immediately. Horses shuffled gently in their stalls, their soft breaths filling the quiet space. It felt like walking into a comforting memory. She said good morning to each horse she passed, her voice calm and friendly. When she reached Rusty's stall, she paused again. She wanted to take a moment just to observe him, just as she had taught herself. Rusty stood near the center of his stall, facing her, his ears turning toward her the moment he noticed her presence. His eyes looked soft, curious, and welcoming. He seemed to remember her just as clearly as she remembered him. "Good morning, Rusty," she said softly. Rusty blinked slowly, a peaceful gesture that always made her feel warm inside. He took a small step toward the stall door, lowering his head slightly in a sign of calm acknowledgement. Lena smiled, feeling a quiet sense of pride. She had come a long way since the surprising moment a week earlier. And in a strange way, she felt that Rusty had come a long way too. She leaned lightly against the stall door, watching him with gentle eyes. She remembered everything they had been through, the peaceful mornings, the small surprises, the learning moments, and the growth that had followed. She didn't blame him for anything. In fact, she appreciated the experience because it taught her something important. Understanding grew from patience, and trust grew from calm moments shared between two beings. When she opened the stall door, she moved slowly, letting Rusty see her actions clearly. She stepped inside with steady confidence. Rusty didn't step away or appear unsure. Instead, he stood still, waiting for her like an old friend. She brushed his mane with soft strokes, feeling his warm coat under her hands. Rusty relaxed into her touch, lowering his head as if enjoying the simple comfort of being cared for. Lena felt a peaceful connection growing between them, stronger, deeper, and more meaningful than before. As she brushed him, she talked to him quietly about her week, even though she knew he couldn't understand her words. But he could understand her tone, her calmness, her presence. Horses listened in ways that didn't require language. Rusty flicked his ears toward her, listening gently, as though he appreciated the sound of her voice. A few minutes later, Mr. Harris walked into the stable, carrying a small box of grooming supplies. He saw Lena inside Rusty's stall, and smiled with a proud, approving expression. "You two look good together," he said warmly. Lena looked over her shoulder and smiled. "He's calmer today." Mr. Harris nodded. "Sometimes all it takes is a little time and understanding. You handled everything well." Seeker, Lena felt her heart warm at the compliment. She knew Mr. Harris didn't give praise lightly, and hearing it from someone with his experience felt meaningful. After brushing Rusty, she guided him gently out of the stall so she could clean the space. Rusty followed her steps at a comfortable pace, showing complete trust. He walked beside her with quiet confidence, as though he felt safe with her. Outside the stall, she tied him loosely to a post and stood beside him while she swept the floor and arranged fresh hay. Rusty stayed calm, shifting his weight occasionally but never showing signs of discomfort. Lena spoke to him softly each time she passed by, and he responded with small signs of calmness, soft snorts, slow blinks, and gentle movements. When the stall was clean, she led him back inside. He stepped in without hesitation, lowering his head to sniff the fresh hay. Lena stood by the door and observed him for a moment. Everything about him felt peaceful today, almost as if he understood her better than before. Later in the morning, the ranch began preparing for visitors. It was a weekend, and families were expected to come for a small guided walking tour of the stable. Lena was asked to help with Rusty, since she knew him best. Instead of feeling nervous, she felt excited. It was a chance to show others how gentle and thoughtful Rusty truly was. When the visitors arrived, Lena stood beside Rusty's stall with a welcoming smile. Children and adults gathered around, admiring Rusty's shiny chestnut coat and calm posture. "He's beautiful," one woman said. "He looks so friendly," a little boy added. Lena felt proud. "He is friendly," she said warmly. "He can be thoughtful and a little quiet, but he's very gentle." Rusty lowered his head toward the boy, sniffing his hand lightly. The boy giggled with pure happiness, and Rusty remained calm and steady. Lena smiled, feeling the emotional meaning of the moment. Rusty wasn't just calm. He was showing trust in her and comfort around others. Throughout the day, Lena guided Rusty during small walking sessions for the visitors. She kept her movements steady, her voice soft, and her presence calm. Rusty followed her lead with grace and ease. Whenever she paused, he paused. Whenever she took a step forward, he followed. It felt like a dance between them, quiet, connected, and filled with trust. At one point, she gently placed her hand on Rusty's shoulder and leaned close, whispering something only he could hear. "You're doing amazing today," she said softly. Rusty lifted his head slightly as if acknowledging her words, and Lena felt a warm wave of affection for him. It felt like a moment that closed a gentle circle past confusion turning into understanding, and understanding turning into a deeper bond. When the day ended and the last visitors left, the ranch became quiet again. The sun hung low in the sky, filling the stable with a soft, golden glow. Lena returned Rusty to his stall, loosening his halter gently. She stood there for a moment, simply watching him. Rusty nibbled a bit of hay, and then turned his head toward her. His eyes looked soft and content. "Thank you for today," she whispered. She knew he couldn't answer her the way a human would, but he didn't need to. The connection between them spoke louder than words. Rusty took one small step toward her, stopping just close enough to show that he felt comfortable near her. It was a simple gesture, but one that touched her deeply. Lena placed her hand over his warm neck, feeling his steady breath and the soft rhythm of his presence. She knew she had grown not just as a volunteer, but as a person. She had learned how to stay calm, how to be patient, and how to listen to things unspoken. Rusty had taught her that. Their small moment of misunderstanding had become a bridge to something stronger. As she stepped back from the stall and closed the door gently, she felt peaceful. She knew that she and Rusty would share many more mornings, many more quiet lessons, and many more moments of trust. The ranch felt warm around her, filled with soft light and gentle sounds. Everything felt right, and Lena walked away with a calm smile, knowing that her bond with Rusty would continue to grow slowly, quietly, and beautifully, just like the morning sun rising over the fields.